is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishnabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today's session is the first meeting with our new member, Councillor Jamal Myers, who is also the chair of the TTC and taking care of a bit of an outage at the moment, so he's double duty at the moment. But Councillor Myers, Jamal, welcome to the committee. Councillor Myers has a long and deep and close connection to Toronto Community Housing, so we're really lucky to have you with us, so thank you. During today's public session, there are 3 reports being brought forward to the committee for information. And I'd note in this hybrid model that, you know, as we've done in the past, members of the committee will be asked to vote by a show of hands. One member of our committee is joining by phone, and so we'll do verbal voting there. So let me begin to see if any members of the committee, if you have a conflict of interest, could you please identify it, which item and the nature of the conflict? So let me pause there to see if anybody has a conflict. Okay, seeing none, no conflicts of interest were declared for any item. I'll ask for approval of the public agenda items. Are there, and so we'll do the agenda run through here. If there are, let me start by seeing if there's items on the agenda that members of the committee wish to hold. I'd note that we have deputants, we have 3 deputants today on item 5, which will be held, as well 1 deputant on item 5 and 2 on item 8, so those will be held. Would members of the committee like to hold any of the other items? I'd like to proactively hold number 6 so that we can have a brief overview by staff. So item 5, item 6, and item 8 are currently held. Members of the committee, are any other items you wish to hold? Okay, seeing none. So I would ask for a motion to adopt the recommendations in the reports on the public meeting agenda, except for the 3 items that are held. Would somebody like to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Myers. All those in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that carries. Let me see if, looking for item 4, confirmation of the public meeting minutes from the last meeting. Well, that's just ask for a motion to approve those minutes. Moved by Brian, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that carries. Okay, so then we can dive in. So the first item up is item 5, business arising from the public meeting minutes and action items update. Just checking my notes, I believe we have 1 deputation, 1 person speaking on that, and that is Catherine Wilkinson. Yes, I do. So Catherine, when you, if we can have the team make sure that Catherine, oh, there she is. Hello, Catherine. I'm not sure if you can see me. I'm waving at you. Catherine, oh, lovely to see you again. We saw each other a month ago, but before that it had been years. So welcome back. And Catherine, so you'll have up to 5 minutes when you're ready. And so can I turn the floor over to you?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So welcome, Jamal. Thank you for choosing to join Toronto Community Housing Board of Directors. As a former tenant director on this board, I'm someone you might see more often than not deputing to help support Toronto Community Housing move forward. So welcome and thank you for agreeing to serve on this board. Okay, so on action item number 5, specifically speaking to the GCHRC work plan, on the action item list, this was something that had been agreed to by the governance committee in January, that we would work to review the stakeholder deputation policy for the board this year, and it was scheduled for tenant consultations in July and August of this year, which we know did not happen, and rescheduling it today has gone to Q2 24, and this may impact on in-person meetings due to weather or COVID in terms of tenant participation. So this policy has not been reviewed since 2010. So it's already 14 years old. We all know this. And I have no doubt that the 6-month delay in reporting back is likely due, to operational needs arising, and management would likely advise the committee of why they're deferring it to next year. So I just wanted to make a suggestion or a recommendation that, when management wish to change the agreed upon timelines to report back on an action item, it should be presented to the committee first, advising them on the nature of the delay and to approve of the revised timelines in advance of deadlines. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Let me just first see if, opening it up to committee members, if there are any questions for Catherine. Okay, seeing none, we'll bring the item in the committee. I'm sorry, I just have a bit of feedback. Oh, Ziva, if you wouldn't mind just muting your phone for the moment. Thank you. So we'll move this into committee. Any questions? First of all, let me just see if there's any questions for staff.
Yeah, I have a question here. So, Catherine, you're saying that the tenant advisory.
So, Catherine, just so you're ready, this is Ziva's a question for you. Sorry, Ziva, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a question. So you're saying that the tenant advisory tenant consultations hasn't happened in July and August?
No, they did not.
Was there any communication to the tenants on the reasons why that was the case?
No, there was not.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to confirm that.
I have a question, and I think this might be for the staff.
Yeah, so we'll move it into committee. Yes, Marcel, a question for staff.
Do you have any idea when the timeline would be for the first initial meeting with the Tenant Advisory Committee?
So through the chair, our first Tenant Advisory Committee is next week. September 28th, I believe. And the information should have been shared with... Sorry,
Ziva, I'll just ask you when you're not speaking to mute. Thank you.
So I believe the information has been shared with all Tenant Advisory Committee members and tenant members of the board. So if you haven't received that information, Marcel, I'll follow up with staff after this meeting.
Thank you. And so moving into committee.
Can I say something? Oh, sorry.
Oh, Ziva, yeah. Did you have further questions, Ziva, or it was just to speak on the item?
Speak on the item, but I think we're going into committee right now. So whenever you're ready.
Great. I'll turn the floor back to you momentarily. So just first of all, just on the item, I would just thank members of the committee. You'll recall, just specifically on the deputation policy, we had a robust conversation at our last meeting, which I think was, and we heard from all members of the committee, which I think was really useful in setting the scope and expectations here, which is how do we provide access and true engagement for our tenants in engaging with the board, more than just, in addition to providing the space for deputations, is how are we meaningfully on an ongoing basis engaging with tenants and residents. And I'll just note in conversations in preparing for this meeting, in conversations with our staff, it was very much in that spirit in engaging with the Tenant Advisory Committee and coming back with a fulsome report as to how do we not just look at deputations, but meaningfully and properly engage. And so I interpret, and in my conversations previously with staff, the intention here is to get the updated deputation policy right, as opposed to get it done as quickly as possible. And so it's on that, and I've had conversations with staff, but I wanted to share that in advance. And so I'm happy wanted to share that. And Ziva, then I'll open it up just to other committee members who may wish to speak on the item, business arising from the last meeting. Ziva, over to you.
Thank you so much. So I would say that it's a bit alarming that there hasn't been any tenant consultations in getting the tenant voices into providing more of a holistic, informed, updated policy. I think that's a bit alarming for me personally, but 14 years is also alarming as well. So I guess my question is, no, I guess that's my comment. I'm still trying to formulate my question to the staff on like what exactly are the next steps, and also what is the processes that they're going to take in order to make sure that, again, as you said, Joe, like we're gonna make sure that we're doing it right. But I do feel like we as the board need to see some concrete processes of how this is going to look like moving forward in the future.
Sure. So maybe, and there, just for hearing from staff, if that's possible, whether that's Nadia or Dara, and just next steps and the focus here.
Happy to provide some additional information for the committee. As far as the tenant engagement process, we have engaged staff from TCHC's Strategic Planning and Communications Division to assist with this review. We are going to be adding this matter to an agenda for the Tenant Advisory Committee, which, as Ms. Gavea has advised, is going to be having their first meeting shortly. And so that will be part of our tenant consultation process. We have discussed with the tenant engagement staff adding this matter or incorporating this matter into the regional meetings that are being conducted with tenants, and also incorporating elements of our tenant consultation process into the tenant survey. Those factors, including the fact that that we continue to work to establish the Tenant Advisory Committee, are the factors that have caused us to make the decision to push back the deadline date on this policy. So this is a welcome opportunity for us to provide that explanation as to why that date has been changed, but it is, as the chair pointed out, an effort for us to ensure that we get the policy right with the benefit of fulsome tenant consultations before we bring it back to the committee.
Thank you, Dara. Let me see, looking around the table, anybody else wish? Oh, Marcel, sorry, I can't see the virtual, you'll forgive me, I can't see the virtual hands on my screen. So Marcel, over to you.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, I did an interview, I think it was in July or early August, regarding the Tenant Advisory Committee. And it was my understanding, and I needed some clarification, but I'm not sure I got a response yet. But it's like the tenant directors that are part of the Tenant Advisory Committee, we're allowed to like be involved in the conversation, but when it comes to voting, we can't vote. And then also the thing about like this is the part that confused me a little bit, is that at the board meetings we're not allowed to speak about it. So I'm like kind of confused with that.
So through the chair, I can attempt to answer that question. So the Tenant Advisory Committee terms of reference does allow for tenant board members to be part of the process and be engaged in the discussion. They are not voting members, and that was a decision made jointly with the city in terms of best practices around engagement. So we can have that discussion further at TSC, but the city will be there to speak to some of the decisions that were made related to TAC at the next TSC.
And can I suggest, just on that, can I suggest perhaps, because the item we're on here is around the business arising from the action items of our last meeting. I think that's a really helpful piece, Marcel, in terms of questions related to the functioning of that committee. And it sounds like there's an openness, and it's planned for at the next meeting of the committee to have further conversation on that committee. Okay, thank you. Great, see the
Joe?
thumbs up. Yeah, Brian, in your hands.
Just wanted to, maybe Derek can clarify. I mean, we spent time looking at deputation issues. We may not have obviously done it to the degree necessary when we were looking at that. So maybe, Derek, you could just comment on, I thought we had made some changes with the deputation policy, but maybe my memory is failing me.
So through the chair, one measure that we have taken in the recent past that impacts the deputation process is the board has established rules of procedure. And through those rules, we engaged TCHC tenants in consultation as to the manner in which we hear from tenants as part of the board meeting. So our current board rules of procedure actually provide a fair amount of detail as to how that deputation process works at the board. So there is some overlap between our deputation policy and the rules that the board has adopted for its meetings. The feedback that we've received from tenants that we've consulted with through that process is that our tenants continue to believe that there is significant value in our adopting and updating the deputation policy, and that's what's driving this work. But through the chair, you're correct, Director Smith. We did actually spend a fair amount of time recently with deputants in crafting our rules of procedure that address the deputation process.
But the two are parallel, but the one didn't change the other.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Joe, I have a question.
Ziva, you have another question?
Yeah, so just based on the gentleman who just spoke, when did you all have that discussion with the tenants in regards to the deputation?
That was, is that 21?
2021?
Or 22, I can't remember.
Through the chair, that was in 2022.
Oh, last year. Okay. Thank you.
Any other members of the committee on this item? Okay, seeing none. And I think building on the discussion last time, I mean, I think this further emphasizes the desire to ensure that when we look at the update to the deputation policy, that it is meaningfully, appropriately, and really deliberately creating avenues for engagement, not just attending a meeting to speak, but to engage our tenants in the operations of the board and the commitment to get it done right and to engage meaningfully in updating that. So more updates to come when this is brought forward. With that, I'm happy to move.
Joe?
Look, Brian, you want to speak?
Just one more question. We had that earlier conversation about whether, and I'm not sure whether it pertains to changing this particular policy or another one, but in terms of location of meetings, because obviously our goal is to make have tenants as accessible as possible to the meetings, and whether within that policy we can look at other locations, because obviously if people can't join virtually, getting to City Hall may be difficult for people who live in the surrounding areas of Toronto.
So maybe just from staff in looking at the deputation policy, whether we're also looking at whether it's online or in person in locations.
We'll do that work as part of the process review, the policy review.
All right. I will say, I must say, and this is as COVID accelerated the move to hybrid, not having to attend in person has certainly helped to improve some means for some people, but I think to your point, Brian, looking at where the options for in-person are, also always worth considering, certainly as part of this. Let me do a call around. Anybody else? Questions or items on item 5? All right, can I have a motion to receive the action item updates for information from item 5? Moved by Marcel, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. All right, we're going to move to item number 5, which is the human rights and sociodemographic, or item number 6, excuse me, human rights and sociodemographic data collection policy. I asked for this to be held so that there would be an opportunity for our staff team. And Barbara, I think we're going to have you kick it off. For those watching online, Barbara is our Chief People and Culture Officer to provide a bit of an overview, and I'll leave it in your capable hands if others want to add to it. A lot of work has gone into this item, and I wanted to hold it down so that we had a chance to understand more fulsomely the item being brought forward. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you, Chair Cressy. So this policy was developed to inform and guide how TCHC uses employee demographic information that we collect from our employees and also from candidates for jobs at Toronto Community Housing. And through this policy, we intend to have an enhanced ability to use data that has already been collected in the past and ensure that the manner in which we collect the data and use the data and store the data aligns with obligations that we have under the Human Rights Code and under the Municipal Information and Freedom Privacy Protection Act. I'm joined today by Jamie Kramer, our Senior Consultant, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, and Kelly Schultes, the Director of Talent Management, both who are the staff leads on this work. And so we're here to answer any questions that the committee may have. This work, this policy in particular, I'll just add that we are intending that through this policy, it will support us in achieving the priority goals and objectives that we've set in our equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy and our confronting anti-Black racism strategy. So we will have a mechanism to evaluate the effectiveness of some of those goals and ensure that we are doing so through a policy that reflects best practice. And happy to take any questions.
So, and thank you for that, Barbara. Maybe just open it up, members of the committee, if there's any questions on the report. It's been quite a substantive piece of work as part of our EDI and CAPER strategy objectives around removing and preventing barriers. So wanted to make sure we had a chance for any questions that people may have. Yes, Councillor Myers.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I did have a question as to how this data will be used. I didn't see anything about, for example, targets for hiring, promotion, retention. So will this data be used for those endeavors as well? And do those targets exist as part of the EDI strategy that by X number of days we will have, I'm just making something up, X number of managers that are considered diverse? Do we have those types of targets in place, and is this part of that strategy?
Through the Chair, thank you for the question. I'll start and then I'll ask my team to jump in. So we definitely have an objective in the organization to ensure that we have diverse representation at all levels across the organization. The policy will enable us to understand, firstly, what is the current state, because we don't have the ability right now to know whether or not we have diverse representation at all levels of the organization because of our inability to use the data effectively to determine how those in equity deserving groups identify at different levels in the organization. So our goal is to have that representation at all levels of the organization. We don't have specific target numbers to say we're going to have this number or this X, but it is ensuring that all levels are represented, and we look to census data to that's the objective, that we strive to see representation in our organization that is consistent with representation in the community. And I'll let Jamie or Kelly add anything to that.
So through the chair, thank you for the question. One of the big issues that we've had currently with the demographic data is that we don't have it necessarily tied to divisions or our units, our managers, and other different areas in our organization. So that is where the gap was and why we created this policy. The goal moving forward is to be able to do ongoing demographic data collection so that we can see, are we missing representation of different equity deserving groups in divisions at different levels, and then work with our teams from there to fill those gaps in terms of what demographics might be missing.
So thank you for that. So just to be clear, is the goal to eventually get towards setting targets, hard targets to meet by certain dates? And I say this because a lot of times when these initiatives are undertaken, the collective response from diverse groups is great. Another study to tell us what we already know. And nothing seems to be happening. And organizations often use these initiatives as an excuse not to hold themselves accountable as to whether or not they're actually setting and meeting targets. So I understand why the program was created, but I do want to understand if this will actually be used to move the needle further with targets and goals that are achievable using this data, rather than just collecting data for the sake of it, rather than just collecting data.
Through the chair, I would say absolutely that is the intent, because we will be able to evaluate, for example, if we determine that in one particular division that we lack equity, we lack representation of particular equity deserving groups, and we will work specifically with leadership in that division to establish goals and hold people, and then develop appropriate strategies and actions to make change, and then we will be able to evaluate the effectiveness of those actions that we take and measure progress and hold people and leaders accountable to making those changes. So absolutely, that is the intent, not just to say, we have a survey, here's the information, here's the current state. It is absolutely to make sure that we're implementing actions to move the dial.
Thank you. And just one final question. Do you have a timeline as to when you believe you will have enough data to start setting these targets?
Through the chair. So the goal next year is to run another fulsome workplace census and inclusion survey, and from there start to socialize more of the data collection process. We still need to build a bit of trust with our staff members to really collect that data and have them feel comfortable sharing that data with us. As you mentioned, a lot of equity deserving groups feel like, oh sure, of course you're collecting this information, but what are you doing with it? So we need to showcase that we are actually using it to further progress, to hold ourselves accountable and be transparent. So the goal is moving forward from there, that we will have that ongoing data collection and then ongoing targets from there.
Great, thank you very much.
Joe?
Thank you, Councillor. And I have Brian and then Marcel. Brian, go ahead.
My question is, have we been able to look at what, because we probably want them to mirror other cities' policy in terms of what they're doing, as well as their, like the TTC, Councillor Myers may be able to comment whether they're doing things, so that we can either learn from their successes or challenges, and make sure that our policy and changes will be consistent across the city's nations, so that we're not just, obviously we want to be as consistent as possible with this whole city's initiative in this area, and they, you know, and I'm sure each of those areas, departments as well as places like the TDC and the police and other ones need to be working on similar challenges. So can staff comment on whether we have access to what's going on with other city agencies and within the city itself?
So through the chair, part of what we did when we created this policy is look at the City of Toronto's data for equity strategy and use that as a foundation and basis for what we did with our policy and how we intend to collect data and share it moving forward. I can also say that I looked at a bunch of other municipalities and different City of Toronto agencies to see what was consistent among them and how we can best use the information to not only look at things like Statistics Canada, but other municipalities to see where we might have demographics that mirror and align with them, and also their reporting mechanisms to make sure that we can be transparent and accountable in how we share the information.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And Marcel.
Okay, so when you get the data and all this, is it going to be broken down as to like, do you have diverse, what is that term you used here? Diversity deserving groups. When you get all the data, is this actually going to be broken down? Like, say, what percent is like, okay, I'm going to just say First Nations or Indigenous, right? So is that going to be identified in that? And also, like you were talking about, like how the recruitment and stuff, is there going to be information as to who or what agencies you outreach for, like say in the Indigenous communities? Because I find a lot of times, and I'm not saying that TCHC is doing this, but I find a lot of times I feel and I see that a lot of Indigenous people are kind of like pushed aside when it comes to getting jobs. So those are the things that I kind of like take a look at. I think the way you're going about it is great, but I just want to ensure that Indigenous people aren't being kind of like shoved aside, you know, for that's it. Thanks.
So through the chair, I can start to answer this and then pass it over to Kelly to talk about more of the recruitment strategies. But yes, the information will be broken down by equity deserving groups. We're also hoping to be able to do what we're calling an intersectional analysis. So not just putting people into one box, but looking at their full diversity to understand, are there barriers when you have multiple different dimensions of diversity and you're trying to either apply at our organization or get training or promotions or whatever the case may be, to really try to break down those barriers. In terms of recruitment, I know we have different elements of outreach and how we're doing targeted workshops with our divisions to make sure that we are doing outreach and recruitment, and we have some specific to Indigenous persons, but I'll pass it over to Kelly for more information on that.
Thank you, Jamie. Through the chair, we are actually exploring a partnership with Indigenous Works, and they do have a job board portion of their platform, which will help us with our outreach to Indigenous populations. And we do have a plan moving into 2024 to really focus on the Indigenous attraction and sourcing strategy in the organization. So more details to come there, but it's definitely something that we're planning on focusing on moving forward. And we are taking some initial steps in terms of some sourcing strategies and also areas that we're posting our job opportunities to attract those in the Indigenous population.
Thank you very much. I'm very relieved and happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see. Siva, I think your mic's open there.
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, so I just have a few questions. One, when you talk about the surveys and updates when it comes to data collection, what's the timeline from one survey to the next? So is it a yearly survey every 6 months to get that information? from your staff, the TCHC staff?
So through the chair, currently we've been doing it every 2 years, but the goal of this policy is to do it on a more ongoing basis. We're just waiting to see what our results are for the next survey, and then determining what is the best approach to have that ongoing dating. Is it having a form in our
Jamie,
workforce?
I'm sorry to cut you off for a second. Ziva, I just asked, could you mute yourself when you're not talking, as we get a bit of feedback with the audio line? Thank you. Sorry, Jamie, back to you.
No problem, thanks. So we're hoping to maybe have a form in our what we call Workforce Connect, which is where we have our employees put things like their address and their information. Or we might do something like an onboarding survey so that when we see what our new hires look like, we can understand where we might need to do more targeted outreach. We're just waiting to see what that first step of our next data collection is through this policy before determining and being really like hard line in the sand of what we're going to do, because we want to be flexible to make sure that we have the correct information so that we can make those targeted aspects moving forward.
Okay, so you're saying that you're going to do the first survey and then you'll get back to us on how that ongoing basis might look like moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd note, I just want to welcome, I know Uba has joined us, and welcome Uba. Any other questions from members of the committee? Okay. And Brian, your virtual hand's still up if you want to pull that down. So just, I wanted to say a few words. First of all, and thank you to members of staff from HR to ITS to legal, and my apologies to other areas in the organization we've missed for the work to pull this together. It is an important step in our commitment to EDI as an employer. And I have to tell you, and this stemming from my work in data collection for a long time in public health, data collection can seem small, but it is an incredibly important step. There's an old adage, what gets measured gets done. When you have disaggregated socio-demographic data as an organization, whether that is on our employment practices or in other areas, when you have that data and it's been appropriately collected and we have meaningfully engaged and socialized why we're collecting it in order to obtain it, when you have that data, you have two choices. You can ignore the inequities you see in front of you, or you can use that data to inform addressing those inequities. In the absence of data, you cannot take appropriate action. And so, you know, that what gets measured gets done. We are measuring it in order to inform the action. And I think what was great about this discussion, and I heard it from Marcel directly talking about how will we use to improve our Indigenous hiring practices. The data helps to inform the steps we take, and then Kelly was speaking to some of those steps we're looking to take. And so for me, in my part, I mean, I think this is an important step because it should, and I know hearing from staff, the intention is to guide action, to become a more equity-focused employer. And if we don't know where the inequities lies, we can't take action. And so it can seem small, data collection. It's not. This is part and parcel of who we aspire to be as an organization in being an employer. And so I'm proud of this report and this work, and I want to thank staff for undertaking it. And absolutely. And I think, as you'll see from the conversation here, this is a committee that's keen to see, so what's next? What's next? What's next? And I know, as we've heard from staff, they're keen too. We're collecting this data to take action. And so we're all keen to get to that next step. And thank you for moving this forward on the road to being a stronger employer from an EDI perspective. Let me see if there's any other comment. I wanted to say a few words there, but let me open it up to any other members of the committee who may wish to speak.
Just one thing, good work, appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Marcel. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, can I ask for a motion to receive the report? Moved by Marcel. Sorry?
Yes, good morning.
Oh, sorry, Uba.
It's going to be a problem. Yeah, it's Uba. Good morning. No, I don't want to say anything. I just want to say thank you so much for this comprehensive and great report. I just want to say thanks to the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Uba. Fully agreed. So moved by Marcel. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, that is carried. And so on to the final item on the public agenda here. We are moving to item number 8, the accessibility measures update. We do have 2 speakers registered on this item, and that is Catherine Wilkinson and Kathy Birch. So if you can both be on standby. And first, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine, if we have her still on the line. Catherine, there you are. Hi, Catherine. Catherine, welcome back. You know the drill. I'm not just going to start saying that. Catherine, you know the drill when you're ready.
Great. Okay, then. All right, so we're on a roll here, so I too want to thank governance staff and the communication staff who have worked diligently to bring our website materials into the AOTA compliance. That acronym stands for the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. While great headway has been made, I think there's a lot more work to be done restoring the institutional records on Toronto Community Housing's website. So a couple areas I'd like to speak to. When naming reports to be presented to board or committees, it is important that the status reports being brought back have the exact same title as the original report. When people search the website for materials, they should be able to find all the reports on that specific subject. In this instance, the name of the original report was Board and Committee Meeting Materials, TCHC's website. This title was used 4 times across governance, BIFAC, and the board. Today, that same report that speaks to this issue is now being called Accessibility Measures Update Report. On page 205, on the first bullet, restore to the TCHC website all available public meeting materials related to the period from January 2004 to December 2011. These materials did not need to be remediated, as those years were exempt from the AODA legislation. And these years were to be restored to our website in their original format, including agendas, minutes, and meeting materials, with the July launch of the new website. They have not yet been restored, and so this item remains outstanding. On the third bullet, publish AODA compliant agendas and public meeting materials 2012 to 2020. This task has been completed. As we know, Toronto Community Housing took the most expedient, cost-effective approach to avoid $100,000 daily compliance fines. So we put as little as possible back up on the website. Management was in discussions with the city around the opportunity to use a shared vendor to help Toronto Community Housing with AODA compliance. There were some 8,000 documents that needed to be remediated. The majority of the reports to the board and committee meetings, as we know, are in a Word document. And at the April 24th meeting, Paula Knight indicated staff had already remediated 2,000 documents and that it is much easier to convert Word documents into the HTML format when it's just text. So I have 3 recommendations. The first one is the committee ask management to add this item to the action item list until such time Toronto Community Housing has completed the agreed upon tasks. The second recommendation is to revert the title of this report back to the original board and committee meeting materials TCHC's website for official record keeping purposes and ease of access on your website. My third recommendation is we know new technology is being developed, making remediation faster and more cost effective. Toronto Community Housing continue pursuing options to remediate the remaining 6,000 Word documents of reports from 2011 to 2020 over time. So with the goal to restore the institutional records of the corporation on its website. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Let me just see if there's members of the committee, if there are any questions for Catherine. We do have another deputant before we go to questions of staff and move it into committee. Any questions for Catherine? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to turn it over. We also have, speaking on this item, Kathy Birch from the RPATH Committee Chair. Kathy, it's been a very long time. It's nice to see you again, albeit virtually. So it has been a couple of years, actually. So Kathy, nice to see you. Welcome. You know this organization far better than me, so you know the drill here. We'd love to hear from you when you're ready.
Welcome back, Mr. Cressy, as chair, although it's in a different seat. You know the drill very well too, and thank you for hearing me out today. So this item is about AODA compliance, and I will support Catherine in her statement about keeping this alive on the action item list, although not only the items that she addressed, I've got a few of my own. Part of the problem with the items not having the title be consistent from 2012 to 2020, currently, what they put up on the website is the agenda and the minutes. The reports are not there. And often, tenants like myself, Catherine, all kinds of us that depute regularly, we're looking for supporting information. And we may have to go back literally years. If the titles are not consistent, we may not be able to find and ask for the reports during that time that are not currently remediated. And one of my asks is that they start planning to remediate those 8 years for the reports. And I've asked for that previously. Another item I asked for previously when it was at governance, and that is, we have a timeline problem that is not addressed, and there's no remedy brought forward as was previously committed to. And the timeline problem we have is this. From 2012 to 2020, we can only look at the agenda items to see if that's the particular item report we may need. Now, our agendas for board and committees comes up a week before, 5 business days before the meeting. Now, if I look at that agenda and I'm looking for backup information, that I have to go back and ask them to pull the report specifically for me because they're not available on the website. They're saying that it's going to take 5 days for us to get the reports. So if the agenda goes up 5 days before, it takes 5 days for them to complete giving me the information. I'm already on the day of the meeting, and therefore I don't have adequate time to go through the materials, see what I need to be a part of my deputation. That's effectively quieting tenants' mouths or anybody else who wants to depute on an item. That timeline problem I brought to governance before. Dara committed, and actually our former CEO committed that they'd work on it to find an answer for that timeline problem. There's no answer for that in this report. this won't do, people. That stifles voices, and although I won't say, I will say it has very bad optics for the corporation. It looks like a deliberate way to try and stifle voices, and we can't have that. In the report today, it actually says that our communications team for 2020 to currently, that all of the documents will be remediated to be fully accessible by the end of this year, because quite honestly, our path was lied to by previous communications staff, and I know they can't be held accountable for what other people did, and I in fairness, I agree with that. But at some point, we need to be able to monitor this effectively and consistently. So I'm going to ask that this item be put on the action item list for follow-up, because I really need that timeline issue answered, and so that it's fair, so that tenants have the opportunity, or anybody else in the public, to get the information that we need to make sure that we can inform our committees of our opinions and stuff like that.
And Kathy,
also,
I don't mean to cut you off, just noting you're just over 5 minutes. But I want to give you time.
Okay,
I want to give you time. I want to give you time to complete. So if you could just condense the last few points.
My last point is, in the report, it says that our comms team has been teaching or informing the different business disciplines that the documents need to be able to be AODA compliant when they're sending them in. I would just ask specifically that comms make sure that those different disciplines know that things like Excel spreadsheets and that need to be created in 14-point format. That is a board approved format for this corporation, and that it be created in 14-point, because it will only print in whatever format or whatever font was originally created in, and that 10-point font or 8-point font that they use a lot of times for Excel spreadsheets, it doesn't work unless you're on a screen. If you need to print it, it's not compliant. So I would ask that they make sure that they do that training to all the different business disciplines. But definitely get this back on the action item list and keep it there until all of the corporation's institutional memory is returned. But I need answers to that timeline.
Thank you, Kathy. Very much appreciated. Let me open it up to members of the committee just to see if there's any questions for Kathy before we let her disappear. Any questions for Kathy? Okay, seeing none. Kathy, thank you very much for taking the time and sharing that feedback with us and those concerns. So let's move it into committee. Let me just open up for questions to our staff and our team. Marcel.
Yeah, just with both deputations, like, how would we go about with the 3 recommendations to follow up on that, and also for the last one regarding the timelines for getting documents before meetings? How would we make sure that that they're being followed through or followed up on?
So I can start in relation to the meeting materials question. So one of the factors that informed the advice that management has provided to the board in relation to this process is that we don't have the experience of members of the public reaching out to us and looking for this data or for these documents. In terms of the challenge that the deputants have identified in relation to accessing those records or reports when required for an upcoming meeting, I don't believe we've actually had that experience of deputants contacting us in that regard. I think we can probably manage that through the process that we currently follow in posting agendas in advance of the meeting and being able to respond to requests for that kind of data. And then we can report back if we have any challenges in that regard. But the recommendations that have come to the board in relation to this matter are informed by the actual experience we've had in managing this kind of requests that we get from members of the public for access to the document and the documents that we are able to see on the website historically and the degree to which they've been accessed. So we had I think the advice is informed by an experience where we had a large number of documents on the website that we were maintaining on a regular basis that simply weren't being accessed by anybody, and that's informed the recommendations that for those older documents that have come to the board in this regard.
I'm glad to know that I'm a nobody. Thank you.
We're in committee here, so other members of committee who have questions? Just a couple in mind. So just having gone through the report and looked back at the April meeting and the recommendations, just two pieces. One is, and it was raised here, this around consistency in the title of reports. And I just wanted to understand that and what might be able to be done. Because I just, for those that are older, if they, has that been identified as a concern? Is there something that can be done to address that?
So I will, through the chair, comment. I'm sensitive to the concern about titling reports in a consistent manner, and so I thank the deputy for her comments in that regard. And we'll make sure that we turn our minds to that issue going forward, so that the reports that we have accessible through the website are easy to link to prior reports where it's an updated document. That is absolutely a measure that we can adopt going forward.
Okay. And then the other one, and so I'm very conscious. I mean, we have to be AODA compliant, and a lot of work has gone into ensuring that we are. Now, for some of the older reports where we know not all are online, I know our experience has been that this hasn't arrived, but I just want to know, how can we make sure for those older reports that if a request comes in, the report can be made available in time for whoever's making the request to review it and prepare in the event that an upcoming board meeting or something else is doing? How can we compress? It was suggested that there's a 5-day timeline that may not be adequate. How can we ensure that we're addressing that such that with some of the older reports not online, that we don't inadvertently end up in the situation where people can't access the information quickly enough?
So I think one way that we can address that is that in the specific circumstance that the deputy has identified, where the access that they're requesting for a report is access in order to inform their ability to contribute to a discussion at an upcoming board meeting through a deputation. If tenants or deputants can identify that is the basis upon which they're making the request, then we'll take steps to expedite our response to be tighter to that board meeting or committee meeting agenda, so that they have the information they require in order to effectively participate in the process. I think the 5-day timeline was considered in the absence of that process specifically. And so we'll absolutely seek to get information to tenants or deputants as they require in order to participate much quicker than that, knowing that that's the purpose that they're requesting the information.
I thank you for that, Derek, because I think I can understand that 5 days is a general practice, but can be expedited for items that are time sensitive to enable people to participate. I would just say, so that gives me a lot of comfort, Derek, and I would just ask that we have that in making the request for information, people need to be aware that they can, if it's time sensitive, make an expedited request. We just need to make sure that that's noted clearly and publicly somewhere. So it's not if you happen to know it can be time sensitive, but it's clear. So on the title, with that work to ensure that the 5 days is a general but can be expedited for quicker, and ensuring that we can address the title of reports for going back in time for consistency, that gives me a lot of comfort, especially in some of the, I think that as we seek to be AODA compliant and a lot of work goes into it, we need to make sure that we are addressing all of the unintended consequences. And I would thank the deputants for identifying some of those and for the responses to ensure that we can, especially in those 2 areas identified. So that satisfies me, and I'm grateful. I think this has been quite helpful with in working to improve that. Let me open it up. Other questions and comments from members of the committee? And I look to Brian. I know because this initially was at the committee when it was under your care and stewardship in April. I didn't know if you wanted to add on, because the baton has been passed collectively.
I know the cost issue was a major concern for the organization in some of the reports that were more than simply Word documents. And I thought we were going to try and see if there was any technology available to make this process easier so that it wouldn't be as costly. So that could take place. And I don't know, whether staff have had time to look into that or not yet, but I know the question in the discussion was around possibly some technology that might make this the ability to convert the documents more cost effective. So I don't know, Dara, was that, I think these were conversations I had earlier, and it was a follow-up from Kathy's discussion earlier with the CEO.
So I can offer some preliminary comments in relation to that. That may be a piece of work that we need to continue to take away. I note that Ada Wong, I believe, is in the meeting from Strategic Communications and Partnerships. I don't know, Ada, if there's anything that you would want to add in relation to our ability to engage technology in doing this work.
Yes, thank you. An update on that item. At the moment, several months later, there aren't any more viable cost or easy options here. The technology has not changed substantially enough. We're looking at different ways to sort and organize and possibly surface the information. But in terms of addressing our concerns around AODA compliance and having these materials be available publicly, there is at the moment no technology option that we've been able to identify for those materials. And the quantity and the age of the PDFs is a significant factor. Trust that I'm not giving up on that, and we will continue to explore options as they become available. And we are also looking with our vendor for the website on a consistent basis for what we can do with the resources that we have available.
So this must be not just a problem for us, but for many organizations. So hopefully there's some geek that is looking at the technology, because it would, I'm sure, be a huge need across many different organizations.
Absolutely. And the sharing of best practices with the city, with other organizations that are in a similar situation, there isn't a quick fix at the moment, but absolutely we will keep looking at it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Would anybody else like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, and I will just say with the conversation we've had here, and I think that the helpful collaboration and commitment of staff around the consistency around the title of reports, and also the turnaround for requests coming in when they're time sensitive, and making that clear that there is an expedited timeline for those that are time sensitive. I'm happy to move the recommendation here for the committee to receive this report, and thank staff for working to address these issues that were identified, and the deputants. And so I will move that. All those in favor? Okay. Looking for any opposed? Seeing none. So that carries. Colleagues, that is the final item on our agenda here today. So I want to thank the deputants who participated virtually today for taking the time. Members of the committee, both online and by phone, thank you for being here. And to members of staff, thank you as well. So can I have a motion to conclude the public meeting? My notes say terminate, but I'll go with conclude. Moved by Marcel. Thank you kindly. And we will chat again all soon. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.